Next weekend, Atlantic City, the four of us. Oh!
The UFC this weekend, back with fans in Atlantic City in Dirty Jers, where we are, of course. And honestly, like, just to start, I was really happy to just see like an event with thousands of fans in there screaming. And honestly, like, as the card went on, the fans in AC just got louder and louder. And so I honestly just really enjoyed that, considering all these Apex cards we've gotten lately. But what do you think of like the atmosphere of this one?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, you hit the nail on the head pretty much. And it helps too to have a hometown fighter in the main event. Obviously, I think like it feels like we've been we've been seeing, like, I don't know, maybe at least recently, but a lot of people from their hometown like getting a fight in their homes, country or state or whatever. So I think that definitely adds to the excitement. But
yeah, I always think that helps. But even besides that, obviously this card had a lot of crazy fights, crazy finishes, weird finishes, as we'll get to. But we'll talk a few of the main card fights, a few of the prelims, and as always, we'll start with the main event, and that is Erin Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot, or Fior? I think that's how it's said. Because like we went to the weigh-ins, obviously. Check out that vlog if you guys haven't already. But when Brendan Fitzgerald said it, that's how he said it. And like, I was always torn between Fiorot and Fiorot because I'd heard both. But you know me, like when the commentators say it a certain way, that's the way I'm going to stick with. So Manon Fiorot defeats... I got it wrong again. Isn't that crazy? But Manon Fior defeats Erin Blanchfield by unanimous decision. All three judges scored at 50-45. So it was a very dominant display of mixed martial arts. It just seemed like Manon was a lot bigger in there. And, you know, when we were at the weigh-ins, we were talking about this just before the pod, but it just looked like Manon was way bigger than her, like in terms of height and stature. And I think that played a heavy role in this fight, along with the massive striking advantage that she clearly had. But she was landing the same check hook after every entry by Erin Blanchfield. It was kind of crazy, like just seeing Erin go in there over and over again. It just seemed like she couldn't break that range, and even when she could in the clinch, Manon just looked way too strong for her, and like her base was so strong that Erin couldn't really get her down most of the time, and that was really the fight. But what did you think of this flyweight title eliminator?
Yeah, so with us being at the weigh-in and all, and seeing them live, go face to face, you want to pick up on those things about the size difference and all that, and think that it could play a big factor into the fight, but you obviously don't know until it actually happens. And you can only just base off what we've already seen from these two, and they're both at the top of their game right now. And just I think just one woman is just way more, I would say, a lot more experienced at this point in UFC, has had a really good run going, whereas Erin Blanchfield is still starting up, and has gotten to where she is now like pretty fast. So like that's obviously no knock to her at all, but I think here was just that experience difference definitely played its role. And right now it just seems like Manon Fiorot just has it. She's got it all figured out, the flyweight division, and even just before this fight, it was clear that whoever was gonna walk away the winner of this fight should get that title fight next.
Yeah,
so
I definitely agree with that. And honestly, we could even hop right to that just because it's the big conversation. That's why this fight was so big and why it was a main event. The winner of it should get a title shot at women's 125. It seems like right now it's a little bit in limbo because, tough 32 with Valentina and Alexa Grasso. So that dust has to settle first. But I think after that, Manon has had 7 straight wins in the UFC now. And her last 2 over Thug Rose and now Erin Blanchfield, who obviously people who've been watching us for a while know that we think really highly of her. And honestly, I still do. That's why I think that this Manon win was just really, really impressive because she really dominated this fight. It wasn't close really at all, maybe besides the very beginning. I remember Erin had that guillotine attempt early in the first round, and that was really the biggest moment of the fight for her, which is it's unfortunate because she was in front of her home crowd, but at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, you could tell that she obviously really wanted to just get that grappling going however she could, but
just wasn't working.
I think Manon Fiorot was just really comfortable in the pocket and just staying on the back foot and counter striking to a T.
Yeah, I mean when they got in the clinch early, that's kind of in my head where I was like, well, if Erin can't get her to the ground here, then this is going to be a tough night for her because we already knew coming in that Manon had a pretty good striking advantage, and then once she was trying to lift her and you could tell Manon was defending those takedowns, that's kind of when you started to get a little worried. And this fight, honestly, it could have been even more one-sided, but Erin was landing to the legs and to the body, but Manon was just countering so well, like you just said. Check hooks and kicks just to keep her at bay. And she looked a lot faster in there, too, on the feet, honestly. It was just a masterclass of a performance, in my opinion, by Manon Fiorot and over somebody in Erin Blanchfield, who I still honestly think has a pretty good chance at becoming champion in that weight class at some point. But Manon's time seems to be right now. I think she has to fight for a title next, no matter when that is. I don't think she needs to have another fight in between. But, this main event, I think, really showed us a lot about her. And I'm curious to see what happens with her next. But to move on to the co-main, I mean, how about Joaquin Buckley? Because I don't think anybody thought that this fight was going to go the way it did. And not to knock Buckley, but just we've seen him in these types of fights before, and he never has really taken that next step. And Vicente Luque is a guy who's dangerous everywhere, on the feet, on the ground, and in this fight, Buckley seemed to have the upper hand everywhere, and it was just a brutal TKO. He looked so composed in this fight. I don't know if you noticed that, because usually he swings wild with those overhands and the hooks, but in this fight, he really just seemed to stay in the pocket and let the fight come to him, and I think that really was the difference in this one. And then obviously Luque, knowing that he couldn't really stand with him, tried to take him down, that really weak takedown attempt. Buckley ends up on top, and when you got a guy like that raining down ground and pound on you, that's pretty much all she wrote. So what did you think of this awesome win by Joaquin Buckley?
I was kind of surprised to see a knockout so soon, to be honest. I thought things would escalate a little more, and then maybe Vicente Luque would just gas out at some point, and then Joaquin Buckley would finish him that way. But it really, Vicente Luque was just super overmatched on the feet, and that's a credit to Buckley too. Like you said, he's improved a lot in that area instead of swinging wildly and just relying on his power to put someone away. But he just this here just seemed like a matchup that was it was kind of like tailor made for him, I feel like, and it's obviously huge too when it's somebody that's already ranked. So now Joaquin Buckley gets the number next to his name now. So I think that's super dope. I love to see guys break that glass ceiling in a way, and then just really put everyone even more on notice than they already have. So
I mean, I think those stories are just awesome. I mean, when you look in the past, and not saying that we know that Buckley's going to get to this point, but when you think of certain people over the years who've improved and gotten to the top, even lately with Cheeto, even though he didn't win that fight against Sugar Sean, he's improved so much through his career. But even before that, you got like people like Charles Oliveira or Michael Bisping who have taken losses in their career, tough losses at bad spots, and then they rise up and do something special. And Buckley right now, in this fight against Luque, I think he looked better than he's really ever looked. And this is a guy who's had so many crazy moments in the octagon. I mean, everybody remembers that one knockout over Impa Kasanganay, but in terms of his composure and just how good his boxing looked, his grappling, it was just incredible. I was honestly really impressed by Buckley, especially over a guy like Vicente Luque, who, like I said, all around is just super dangerous always. And even if you thought that Buckley was going to win, I don't think anybody thought it was going to go quite like that. But like you said, Buckley will probably be ranked now because Vicente Luque was number 11. Buckley said he wants to fight in St. Louis. I have an opponent in mind because I was looking at the rankings. I'm like, who could he fight? Because I don't think he's at the point yet where you really catapult him into that upper echelon. But then I saw Jeff Neal, and I thought about those two powerhouses in the octagon together. And I think that would just be a crazy fight for maybe like a co-main event in St. Louis. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest with you, I think it's just really two guys. In a way, for me, it's kind of like a similar matchup to Vicente Luque, but at the same time, you're getting a guy who's even more powerful than Vicente Luque, and is probably not gonna allow himself to get hit as much, but it's still gonna give it back to Joaquin Buckley, and those two are probably put on just whether it goes the entire fight or not. I think they'll both put on a beating on each other. So
yeah, I mean, you got two dudes in there with heavy hands like that, and you could argue that those two have two of the heaviest hands in the division, or four, I guess technically, out of the both of them. But I think that fight would just be crazy. I mean, when I think about it, I'm just like, oh my god, like it's just like two Mike Tyson type of fighters coming at each other. I mean, they both throw with so much power and veracity. I think that Jeff Neal is probably more inclined to keep it on the feet or in the clinch up against the cage more than Luque, because Luque, honestly, he's a guy who can really fight anywhere, but Jeff Neal has a very like specific style, and I think that style would match up very well against Joaquin Buckley in terms of like a fan-friendly fight. So let's hope that some UFC matchmaker hears this or thinks of the idea, because I think that would be a fun one. But let's move on to the All-American, Chris Weidman. And, you know, we talked at the weigh-ins, obviously, in that video about wanting a vintage Chris Weidman performance. And you have to talk about the end. But in a way, it kind of was a vintage Chris Weidman performance, because he was dominating the fight with his wrestling, on the feet even in the second round, but I think you have to start with the ending. It ended in it looked like a TKO, but then they called it a technical decision because of the eye poke, because the fight went far enough that they could have just went to the judges' scorecards. So I guess my first question to you would be, did this deserve to be a win, or should this have been a no contest?
To me, as far as overturning it to the technical decision goes instead of a knockout, to me, I think that honestly that doesn't even matter as much, considering Chris Weidman won anyways. But it also like it was unfortunate, but I mean it was also like kind of both ways too. I think there might have been like something wrong with the gloves, to be honest. Like they might just have to like fix those gloves. But
I mean, I'm on the Joe Rogan train with the gloves. He always says that they gotta employ Trevor Whitman to make their gloves. I don't know if you've ever seen that episode of Joe Rogan when he brings his gloves on there, but it basically they force your fingers to stay like this. Like you can grapple, but you can't keep them like that. Like you have to make an effort basically to go like this with your hands. So basically, like instead of Weidman going like that to measure range and try to grab, his hands would be more like this. And I think that would be a lot better, because even if, you know, I go towards your eye, like my hands are down, it's my, you know, when it's your knuckle, it's not really as much of a blow. But at the same time, I kind of saw Chris Weidman's point in a sense that, like, he felt bad for poking him, but at the same time, I don't think you can really drop in that situation the way Bruno Silva did, because that made it look like he was hurt from the punch, and that's why the stoppage happened. So I do kind of get that point. I don't think he wanted a way out of there, because that was another thing that Chris Weidman kind of implied, but I don't know. I mean, that was the third eye poke in the fight. I think the second in that round. It's just a super unfortunate way to have it end, because I think the story now is about that when it should be about how awesome Chris Weidman looked against a guy who honestly is pretty underrated at 185, if I, just in my opinion at least. But I don't know, like in terms of the fight itself, obviously it's Chris Weidman's first win since that leg break at, I think, UFC 261 that was. So what did you think of the performance itself? Because I thought it was a pretty awesome all-around win.
Yeah, it seems like he's still able to still strike with those leg kicks as snappy as he's been able to, and which is like, yeah, obviously coming back from an injury like that was because of a leg kick. Like, you have to be aware, be cautious of those things, but it seems like he really didn't skip a beat, to be honest. It's truly like I would even say one of the more underrated middleweights of like this generation. So to see him, like you just said, another underrated name in the division that he was able to handle, obviously with the controversy, however you want to judge it or not. But I think anyways, Chris Weidman, like, there's nothing that you can take away that he stood up to the test for sure. Yeah. And it's he's back. So I guess going forward, I guess I don't know if maybe because once again, I don't know how we really don't know how many UFC fights we have left with Chris Weidman, but
I mean, he seems to think he has quite a few, and I honestly really respect that. Like, he still believes in himself, and on the one hand, you could say that that's misguided, but on the other hand, me and you are sitting here as fans, people who cover the sport, and who are we to say that Chris Weidman can't make a run? Because in this fight, we talked about Bruno Silva, super underrated guy. I really thought we saw all of the strengths of Chris Weidman's game, because in the first round, we saw the wrestling. In the second round, we saw him keep Bruno Silva at range with the jab and, I guess, an eye poke in the middle there. And even his fight IQ, just to kind of, like, not let himself get drawn into that dogfight that Bruno Silva was trying to draw him into. I think that was smart, because Silva would blitz forward and Weidman would keep him at bay, and I thought that was just really impressive. And like I said, with the ending, it's just tough, because that's going to be the story, because people are going to say that should be a no contest, and maybe they're not wrong, but I think according to the rules, the fight went far enough that they could have went to a decision. Yeah. Weidman was doing great anyway, so I think he deserved the win. So it was nice to see him get one. But let's talk about some of these prelims, man, because I know there's one we got to get to first. Nate the Train Landwehr, congrats to you. You got your round prop right. I asked you at the weigh-ins, under a round and a half, and you got it under, that's for sure. But this fight, man, I know I texted you. I was literally I was shaking when Nate won, because he gets hurt in the first 30 seconds, and he kind of covers up, not even really because he's still majorly hurt, but I think he was truly trying to gas Jamal Emmers out, because you knew Emmers was trying to finish the fight once he smelled blood. And he was throwing hands, dude, they were heavy, heavy shots, and Nate is so tough. Yeah. He just took him and then comes back, and it starts to become your typical Nate Landwehr war. Yeah. Overhand right, uppercut. That's all she wrote for Jamal Emmers. What did you think?
It's usually Nate the Train on the attack from the get-go, and you don't, at least until now, you haven't seen that much of him with his back against the wall and having to rebound and then just once again just turn it into the kind of fight that we've grown accustomed to seeing Nate Landwehr fight. But I think I don't know. We don't know what the gameplay might have been or whatnot. Maybe that was he's instead of going for the kill shot right away, he is gonna try to drag Emmers into the deep water, but obviously Emmers had different plans, and so I think Nate clearly had to adjust to that, and he just
I
yeah,
think
dude, like
I think Nate also kind of struggled with the range in the beginning because Emmers looked really long in there, and it looked like Nate was on the end of his punches and was really trying to figure out a way to break that range and land like he basically did towards the end of the round. And really, I think he knew early he had to make it into a war because this wasn't a fight that you're going to be able. He wasn't going to be able to win on the outside, trying to counter those long jabs, crosses, hooks from Jamal Emmers' side because it just looked like there was a massive disadvantage in that sense. But once Emmers kind of seemed to get a little tired, Nate was able to kind of work his way in there, and I was just, I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. I mean, when I was watching it live, I was like, oh God, this isn't looking good for Nate the Train. But in my head, I'm like, Nate kind of has that dog mentality and granite chin. So
I think he definitely embraces that for sure. But obviously, you want to be on the attack and not on the receiving end. But
he did what he had to do.
Yeah, to be able to do that in one round too, like because we already know like with a Nate Landwehr fight. It's gonna look afterwards like it was a complete 5-round war, but in reality it was obviously only 3 rounds, or just in this case 1 round, and so that was the case once again. And he pulled it out.
He's so entertaining, and we've talked about guys who should never fight at the apex. I think Nate Landwehr is near the top of that list, even maybe over some champions, honestly, with how exciting he is. And even on the mic afterwards, he gets so amped, he gets everybody into it. I wrote the one quote down because I thought it was just the greatest play on words I think that I've seen in a while from a UFC fighter. But I'm feeling like a young Jean-Claude Van Damme. I couldn't believe I was laughing so hard when he said that. He's just so excited every time he gets in there, especially when he wins. And I think that the UFC should honestly give this dude more fights like this against strikers who you're going to have an exciting war with, win or lose. He's just that type of guy. You'd like to see him keep moving up the division. I think if he gets more wins like this one, we'll definitely be seeing him fight more ranked guys in the future. But this win was just absolutely incredible. We had to talk about it. I was happy for you, like I said, because you got that pick right, and that's like the first thing I thought of too before I texted you.
I was no hesitation with that too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just he brings the big fight every time. So
yeah, always has to be in front of a crowd. I hope that the matchmakers know that. But another fight that I wanted to talk about on the prelims, which was an underrated type of fight in my opinion, Virna Jandiroba versus Luque Godinez, and Virna won the fight, unanimous decision, 229-28 and 130-27. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this fight is because if you're into jiu-jitsu and you haven't seen this fight, go watch it. Because I was just so impressed with the grappling exchanges on both sides. I mean, you don't usually see a lot of people rolling for leg locks constantly in MMA because of the ground and pound element. And even when you look at just the fight itself, rounds 1 and 2 were basically even. And then round 3, Luque was doing really well early, but then Virna basically stole it at the end with the ground and pound from back mount. And once the 30-27 scorecard got read, I was pretty confident that Virna won. But when they read the 229-28, I honestly wasn't too sure. But what did you think of this one, man?
So it's one of those, and I really enjoy these kinds of fights that it really does come to the last round. Like you can kind of just wash away the rounds that came before and then just boil it down to the last round. In this case, it was something like that. The second round was just so close to call.
Yeah, I mean even the first, it was so close. I mean, I gave the first round. I want to say I gave the first round to Virna, and then the second round I gave to Luque because the thing is on the feet, it wasn't really as close because it looked like Godinez's reach disadvantage was really playing a role. Virna did a good job at pumping the jab out there and also just landing crosses to counter. And Luque Godinez really had to work hard to get in that range. But when she did, it seemed like Virna Jandiroba really had no problem grappling with her. And I don't like it was just it made it into a really fun fight because like I said, I love seeing like these types of fights where you're seeing reversals on the ground, submission attempts, leg lock attempts, because like I said, leg locks are risky in MMA when you got people throwing hammer fists at your head. So I just really enjoyed this fight, and that's like why I wanted to talk about it. And honestly, in the prelims too, for a prelim fight, it was a pretty big fight. 2 top 10 strawweights, Virna ranked number 5, Luque number 10, and we got treated to a very, very close fight with a lot of awesome grappling. And I know the jiu-jitsu lovers out there had to enjoy that fight because I'm not even a guy who is the most educated on jiu-jitsu, and I loved watching that one. So I was really excited by it. And honestly, a big win for Virna Jandiroba. I mean, she's ranked number 5 at strawweight. She's towards the top. And I was thinking of other grapplers who she could be a fun matchup against. And the first person that came to my mind that I wrote down here was Tatiana Suarez. And I don't know how that fight goes. I think Tatiana Suarez is a force at 115, and I don't know if anyone can stop her. But in terms of a fun stylistic matchup, wrestling versus jiu-jitsu, I would love to see Virna Jandiroba versus Tatiana Suarez for either a 5-round main event or a 3-round fight on a pay-per-view or a big fight night card like this one, because it would just be fun for grappling fans to watch.
Yeah, there's options out there, I definitely think, but it's also like, is it how much of a jump is it really from Luque Godinez, you know? So
I think it's just the ranking though. Like, she's had enough wins to stay in that top 5 spot. I think at some point you kind of just have to give her an opportunity, even if you don't think that she can win or if she deserves it. I just think that she's kind of earned it at this point. And kind of how Luque Godinez earned a fight against Virna, because obviously Virna's in the top 5. Luque Godinez has had a good run as of late. So, I mean, it seems like they're not opposed to giving people some shots at big opportunities at women's strawweight. So hopefully Virna, with this very exciting win, honestly, gets a shot at that upper echelon again, because who knows how she could do. I mean, she's gotten some good wins. So I would love to see it. But honestly, like I said, I was just happy this card was in front of fans. There were so many crazy finishes. I mean, Julio Arce, Ibo Aslan, just insane card. And in front of a roaring crowd, which we're not really going to get next week at the UFC Apex, UFC Vegas 90. Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis 2. Chris Curtis is stepping in on short notice for the injured Marvin Vettori. And, I mean, it's not a horrible card. There's some interesting fights that are there, but I think next week we're probably only going to be talking about the main event, because obviously the week after this Apex card is the huge UFC 300 card, and I think next week we have to preview that for the listeners and the audience, because this is a landmark event for the UFC. It's stacked from the first prelim to the main event, and I honestly can't wait. I can't even believe that it's basically here. You know, we're recording this on April Fool's Day. It's crazy that on the 13th we're going to be treated to one of the best cards that we've seen in a while.
Yeah, and the closer we get to it, the more I see fans warm up to it than it was than like initially when these fights got announced. Yeah. I don't know why that is, to be honest, but I guess like fans, you know, we as fans just have like such high expectations because of how like we view these fighters, obviously, and how just like how much of like gladiators they are. But I mean, yeah, like it's set in stone now. I mean, you can't. What else can you really do other than to get hype for it? So
yeah, I mean, I said this when the main event got announced and people were kind of criticizing it not being box office enough. I'm like, just think about Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira's styles. This fight is going to be amazing. Whether it just be a crazy knockout or a 5-round war, I think that fight matches up well. We obviously have the BMF fight, Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje at lightweight, women's strawweight title fight, Zhang versus Yan. And, I mean, we're going to be going through it next week, but those are just the main 3 fights. It's just going to be unbelievable. And I think, like you said, fans are starting to realize the treat that they're getting, and it's it's time to warm up for it because we're here and this is going to be a big one. So many huge fights, so many exciting fights. And next week, we can't wait to preview it with you guys. So we'll see you all then.
Hey,